All right. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us. My name is Tyler Adams. I'm CEO and co-founder here at CertifID, and we are very excited for this month's edition of To Catch a Fraudster. We're going to be talking about real estate and title agents and how to fight fraud together. So we're joined by a number of guests that I'm going to introduce here in just a minute, but wanted to also call out that October is Cybersecurity Awareness Month. And so we thought it'd be a lot of fun to do something a little bit different this month and have sort of this engaging conversation around how title agents and real estate agents can partner and think through collectively working together to combat the fraud that we're seeing. So I think we're going to get a lot of interesting perspectives today. I'm dialing in from all to one, so excuse the weird lighting here in my hotel room, but it was fortunate to be able to host this one today. And yeah, really looking forward to the conversation that we're going to have. So as part of our agenda, I'm going to do a little introduction to the speakers here in just a minute. We're going to talk about what it means to be a real estate agent in 2023. And then we're going to hear, what real estate agents are hearing about fraud, how they're thinking about it, kind of from the front lines of that consumer conversation. And then what title agents can do to help and kind of how we can forge a partnership between the two. And as always, we'll try to provide everybody with some recommendations and best practices and things that they can do moving forward to help keep everybody involved in a real estate transaction safe from fraud. So we're going to start off by making some introductions here for today's speakers. So we've got Jim Gamble from the Gamble Group. Jim, if you just want to say hi and let us know where you're dialing in from today.
Hi, guys. Jim Gamble calling from Kansas City, Missouri.
Love it. And Jim's part of Keller Williams Realty. And then Matt McBride. Matt, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yep, Matt McBride. I'm part owner of Continental Title Company. I'm in Overland Park, Kansas. We have offices in Kansas and Missouri. And I have a consulting company that I deal primarily with title agents, securing their title companies, and then do some work if fraud actually occurs, helping to figure out what happened. And I've done a couple of trials, expert witness testimony. And I'm a certified fraud examiner, been heavily involved in preventing fraud in the title industry for several years now.
I was going to say, and Matt also speaks. We've had the pleasure of seeing him on stage a number of times on the conference circuit as well. Yep. And then we also have Jennifer Wauhob. If you want to introduce yourself as well, Jennifer.
You said it right, so good job.
Nice.
My name, everybody's nervous when they have to say my name. I get it. Yeah, so my name is Jennifer Wauhob. I am this year's Vice President of Association Affairs for the National Association of Realtors. I'm a realtor in the Houston area, and I'm a team leader. I have a team of 11. I'm with Better Homes and Gardens down here in this area. I have been in the business for about 13 years now, and out in the suburbs of Houston.
Amazing. All right, well, we're looking forward to it. One just housekeeping item as we're talking today, would love any of the feedback that you have or questions. We've got a little bit of an agenda and some questions we're going to go through, but we'd be happy to take questions that you all have. So don't hesitate to put them in the chat and we will ask them of our panelists today. So I'm going to just jump in with one of the first questions that we have, which is, real estate agents have been through a lot in 2023 due to the current economic climate. What are the top of mind issues for you? So maybe Jennifer, if you want to take that one first.
Well, good, because I get to say the obvious one, and then nobody else can copy me after this, but interest rates. I mean, that's really what is heavily affecting our market here. Overall sales have slowed in our area. We're still not terrible. Things are still moving, but compared to those pandemic years, it feels pretty darn slow right now. And the feedback we get from most clients that we're working with is they're on the fence until those interest rates come down a little bit.
And how do you think, how are realtors specifically, adapting to that?
Well, I think, unfortunately, you're going to have some people, they always say the top 10%, of the agents get 90% of the business. I think you're really going to see the people that are really invested in their business, that, they're continuing to learn, they're committed to this, even through the ups and downs when things aren't so easy. I think those people are going to thrive. And then I think, you have some of those agents out there that are going to suffer and struggle, and they may end up getting out of the business.
Jim, as an agent yourself, like how are you personally feeling?
The market is tight, and Jennifer mentioned interest rates. Inventory is also an issue. So those two things combined are, they just create stress on the market, and they push buyers, out of the market. Those two things press buyers into lower price ranges. All the while, you have sellers that are locked into really low interest rates that have no incentive on selling. And so we just have to deal with the foundational business, and it requires deep relationships with the people you're in business with. Then you just have to articulate, why real estate is still such a great opportunity in America.
When you talk about those relationships, what are you referring to? You're referring to title agent relationships with marketing partners. Who are those relationships that are important, especially when, the market is how it is today?
Well, I think all parties, but most importantly, it's just your buyers and sellers. People that, they're having twins, or maybe they're getting divorced, or mom and dad need to go to an assisted living center, and being there to help educate them and let them know where the market is, and how they can in fact succeed in a tight real estate market.
Yeah. Matt, you have anything to add there from like your seat in terms of how, the title agent side is adapting and kind of working with real estate agents in the more challenging environment?
Yeah. I mean, the COVID years, it was easy, right? I mean, a lot of new agents jumped in when the going was good. Title companies were busier than they've ever been. But those of us have been in the industry for, more than a few years. We know that the real estate industry is cyclical. It goes up and it comes down. It goes up and it comes down. So when it's down, you kind of double down on your relationships, like Jim's talking about. For title companies, it's a great opportunity just to solidify your relationships with your solid agents, and really make sure that they understand that we are here for them, to help them. And especially, the topic we're going to talk about today, fraud in the real estate industry, really making sure that agents have the tools and the information that they need to keep their customers safe. So, it's real estate. I mean, I've gone through this multiple times over the years. I've been in the title business since the mid 90s, and it goes up and it goes down, and our memories are so short term. We only remember the past couple of years, right?
Yeah, for sure.
But these are the times when the strong survive and come out of it on the other end.
So Matt mentioned fraud. I mean, Jennifer, are you hearing more about fraud, or is fraud sort of a topic that comes up with your members? Maybe just speak to that a little bit.
Fraud is always kind of on our minds and going on in some way. What's interesting is I feel like there's trends in fraud and in crime. And so, we've had things in the past. Wire fraud was something that we were really having to educate consumers about and talk about a lot. And now we're having what we call fake seller fraud, people who are calling you asking to list properties that don't actually belong to them. In my area, it's on vacant land. We're seeing a big uptick in it, I would say, over the last 12 months. So it's kind of like the new hot fraud item. We've had rental scams here as far as fraud. I mean, there's just, in this digital world we live in, unfortunately, for all the great things that it affords us, it also provides a lot of opportunity for people to do some shady things. And it's our job on behalf of our clients to educate them and be on the lookout for those things.
And what is some of that education? Like how are you trying to inform members and get the word out so that they can be more prepared?
So here in Texas, when we started to see a lot of seller fraud going on, the Texas Association of Realtors started to host some educational series for agents, because agents are the ones that really need to, when they get that call to list a property and the seller doesn't want to meet with them in person, everything is digital. We needed to let them know what red flags to look for. So we've done an education series, a webinar that was really well attended.
Nice.
A lot of information has been going out amongst our brokerages, flyers, little infographics, things like that. Just, you have to raise awareness, because if it's not top of mind for people when they get that call that sounds too good to be true, which, you know, as we all know, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. If you don't have it in the back of your brain, then you're not going to think to go through those steps and check and make sure this person is who they say they are. So we've just been trying to educate it and really keep it top of mind with our agents.
Yeah, no, that's great. Jim, what about you? Like, what, you know, seller impersonation fraud, is that something that you've heard of or you've experienced or that you know much about?
We've had some cases here in Kansas City that fortunately we were able to, with the help of, you know, the title company, help those elderly sellers. They made a mistake. They responded to an email and then wire instructions, and they lost a couple of $100,000 and they got their money back. But, you know, that's just one instance where, you know, how do we educate buyers and sellers? And, you know, Jennifer talks about, you get the phone call and you don't know who they are, but they own the 40 acres just outside of town. You know, agent beware, right? But when you have an opportunity to have either a buyer or a seller consultation with someone you're in relationship with, you still need to talk about, you know, fraud is there. It's and it will try to potentially penetrate our transaction. And if we don't talk about it, you know, they don't know about it. So I would just say that when you're in a relationship with a client, when you're doing the consultation with them, when you're signing the buyer agency agreement or the listing agreement, you know, fraud prevention needs to be a topic of discussion.
So it sounds like you've also, though, seen like more business email compromise style fraud as well, where, you know, they clicked on a link or they shared information and then that led to moving money to a fraudster, which has been, you know, to Jennifer's point, seller impersonation, I think, is the hot topic right now. But the other types of fraud haven't gone away. You know, those are still happening every single day. Do you think, you know, Jennifer, as we think about like the market, especially, actually last night it already came up as like a topic where, as a real estate agent, especially, you know, market's down, there's less transactions going around. When you get that phone call, like, you really want it to be true that there is a deal on the hook, right? Do you think that kind of drops people's guard or potentially creates an environment where more fraud is able to occur?
It absolutely does. I mean, when people are hungry, they're a lot quicker to just latch on to anything that they think might turn out to be a good deal. And so they don't go through the due diligence that they should, or they don't investigate things like they should. We saw it here in my area. We had a lot of rental scams going on. People were taking a house that was maybe listed for sale, or they were stealing an old listing. They were posting it on Craigslist or Facebook Marketplace, kind of these open forums, and saying it was for rent. And the reason people fell for that was because we had such low rental inventory here. People were desperate to get into homes, so they were willing to just Venmo money to this person, this landlord they had never met, saying, here's my security deposit if you'll hold this house for me. So yeah, desperate times absolutely call for, they create desperate measures. And I think people are a lot more susceptible to fall for those things.
Yeah. Matt, from your perspective, like how should the title agent, you know, think about deals that are coming in from the real estate agent? Is there a level of trust there that should be assumed? Is there more work to be done now when times are tight? Like how do you think about it from your seat?
So, you know, the hot topic, and Tyler, you know this, over the past several months, and Jennifer touched on it, the vacant lot fraud and the out-of-town owner fraud that's really ramped up here in the last 6 to 12 months. Our title company and what I teach and try to get other title companies to listen to is, if you get a contract in for a vacant lot, assume it's fraud. Go do your due diligence immediately. And, you know, and it's fairly simple to do. Look up who is, you know, on the tax rolls, who is the current owner? Is this the person that says that they're selling it? And find the mailing address where they're sending the tax bills. Send a letter to the actual owner and say, hey, are you really selling this property? But Jim touched on it a little bit too. A personal relationship for real estate agents with their buyers and the sellers, especially with this vacant lot. You know, one of the questions we'll ask an agent if they send us a contract for a vacant lot, do you know this person? Have you met this person in person, face to face? Or is this all, I'm in LA and I own a property in Las Vegas and I can't come there and we're only going to do this via email? Those are huge red flags. You just, extra levels, extra layers of protection will keep us all safe.
And just out of curiosity, Jennifer, is that something that you're advising to members, that like they should go meet in person? Or how do you handle those scenarios where, they are out of state or something where they can't meet with them? Or are you suggesting that realtors actually do take that extra step today?
I mean, yeah, obviously, if you can ask if there's any way that you can get in front of them in person, if they're a fraudster, that's immediately going to weed them out right there. But you might have a seller who is legitimately living in another state. I've worked with people that I know personally, and they're out of the country whenever we close or something like that. So while those cases they do happen. Can you get on FaceTime with them? I mean, are they we're really leaning on our title partners to do some extra investigation, and they're going to have to sign some other things. So, I mean, it's really like, it's a team effort to try to make sure that if we do take one of those listings, especially on a vacant lot, that we are working with the people who say they are.
And Jim, how do you feel when Matt says that, if a vacant land deal comes in, you should just assume it's fraud, like first and foremost? Do you think that that's a popular opinion in the from a real estate agent perspective?
Frankly, I don't, because I mean, we have a lot of realtors in this country, and a lot of them are hungry. Many of them, half of them probably haven't done a transaction in the last 12 months, and they get an opportunity, and unfortunately they're hungry, and their guard is down, and they're not probably going to think about, is this fraud? And so I think brokers need to always have an opportunity to talk to their agents and say, slow down, and, be aware that fraud exists, and it could happen to you, and it can happen in many different places.
No, I appreciate that perspective, because I think you're absolutely right. Like, there is going to be that tone in market of, I don't want to think that this is fraud. And I think we try to educate a ton on it as well. I mean, even nowadays, how many phone calls do you get and text messages do you get from UPS or Informed Delivery? And like, there is starting to be that change of what can I trust and what can't I trust? And I mean, we tell everybody, if you get an inbound phone call from a financial institution, from a title company, like, hang it up, go look up an actual number and call them and make sure it's them. But I think it speaks to that need for a partner. And one thing that I think is unique about a real estate transaction is that there are going to be multiple people involved in communicating with that buyer and seller, right? And so when you think about that partnership between the title company and the realtor, how do you all think about that as sort of the, connection that can work together and hopefully not point fingers in either direction, but work as a team to make sure that it's a legitimate transaction? Like, what can the title agent do for the real estate agent from your perspective, Jennifer?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I'm relying on my title partners to help me with these type of things. I'm going to do some certain things on my own. Can you text me a picture of your driver's license? Like I said, can we get on a FaceTime call? Things like that. But they have access and resources to things that I don't necessarily have. They can dig a little deeper, look at records and things that I wouldn't be able to find if I was out there searching. So it really is a partnership. I'm going to do as much as I can on my end, and I want them to do as much as they can on their end. And we're asking, if somebody does call us on a vacant lot and wants us to list it, there's a few extra hoops that seller is going to have to jump through just so we can make sure that it is the correct seller. So it's a partnership. This is like a team effort. We all want to protect the consumer. And so how can we work together to make that happen?
And have you seen that work pretty well from your perspective, Matt? Like, when it comes through and then your team sort of says, hey, let's slow this thing down. Like, are the real estate agents receptive to that? Or have you found a way to sort of navigate those conversations collectively?
Yeah, when I said assume it's fraud, I'm more talking about, internally at the title company, we're going to take a couple extra steps. We're not just going to call Jim or Jennifer and say, hey, I know you got this contract, but we think it's fraud, right? We're not going to say that, but we're going to do internally a couple of steps to one step further to make sure on our end that we're comfortable with this. But I've heard Jim and Jennifer both talk a lot about relationship with your title company, the communication with your title company. And one of the big things I want to get across today, Tyler, with our title, because we've got primarily title agents on this webinar, solidify your relationships with your customers, meaning with your real estate agents. And then also for Jennifer and Jim, make sure your real estate agents understand how valuable a relationship with a title company is, that you can have open dialogue and communication and establish that level of trust that, hey, when you're dealing with Continental Title Company, they do all of this stuff in the background to keep you safe, but more importantly, to keep your buyers and sellers safe. And that's one of the things I want to kind of dive into, if we have time today, Tyler, is really get Jennifer and Jim to speak to the title agents that are on this webinar. What do we need to do better? Because I preach fraud prevention all day long to anybody that'll listen to me, but primarily my audience is title companies. We need to take that one step further. So how can we teach title agents, hey, here's this great information, now go make sure you disseminate it to your real estate agents so that they fully understand what's going on?
Yeah, I mean, would love to hear, Jennifer, what's your opinion on that from more information or things coming from the title company? Because I guess one thing that I think about in this space that's tough is how many different relationships there might be, right? Like the number of real estate agents that a title company works with that are all with different brokerages. And then the same thing where a real estate agent could end up working with a lot of different title companies. And so, there are conflicting messages at times, or there are just, overlap, or maybe even too much information, but would love to hear from you. Like, what do you think would be most beneficial?
Yeah, I think too much information is almost, it's hard to get there. I mean, I'm all about communicate. One of the things that my preferred title company that I work with here does, when we were seeing a lot of wire fraud, is as soon as we went under contract, they sent something to the client, but also I was copied on it as well immediately about, here's what we're seeing with wire fraud. Here are things to look out for. Here are the steps you need to take. Like you said, don't ever trust that we're calling you. We might ask you to call us, or, just they went through all the things that a potential buyer or seller would need to know. And they did that at the very beginning of the transaction, and kind of a colorful infographic, type email that went out to all the parties. So, that way, if I was an agent who wasn't really aware of what's going on with wire fraud, then I'm getting educated just right along with my consumer. So I think it's almost impossible to share too much. Like, if there's something going on and it's something that either the consumer or the agent needs to know about, let them know as many times as possible. What's the saying? I think we have to hear something 7 or 8 times before we remember it. So even saying it one time sometimes is not enough. You have to, throughout the transaction, remind them, oh, and don't forget, don't wire your money, unless until spoken with somebody on the phone. So just education and communication are really the 2 biggest things.
Yeah, I love that. Jim, what about you? What's like an example maybe of something that a title company has done to really support you as an agent, or that you thought was a great sort of example of a partnership?
First of all, I do want to mention, these real estate transactions, they begin, when these properties go under contract, that contract is in our hands. Okay. The title company does not have it yet. So we're the ones that start that, that process. And if you think about, I've always believed that if you don't have an assistant, you are one. And many of us in the industry are now using TCs, transaction coordinators, oftentimes third-party coordinators, and they will, on our behalf, reach out to the title companies, the lenders. They'll reach out to all parties and say, okay, here are the players. Okay, it's not the title company's job to make that introductory, statement to everybody, because they're the one that needs to be introduced to the transaction. And so I think in response to that, those title companies, and oftentimes we're dealing with split closings. We have 2 title companies in a single transaction, which is a whole nother topic that we could discuss. Nonetheless, the title company, one of the bullets in their gun is fraud, and they can't assume that the agent that sends that order to them has that bullet in their gun. So, they have to protect the transaction, and I think probably more so than anybody else. And so the communications that the title company sends out after they receive the order, is paramount to the reduction of fraud and keeping fraudsters out of the transaction.
A question that I have on kind of something that you touched on and Jennifer touched on a little bit as well is, like, we've talked a lot about like relationships and communication and that, but from our seat, we're obviously at Certified trying to enable mostly the title companies, law firms with software to help prevent fraud once it gets to them. But is there any software being utilized at sort of the title, or sorry, at the real estate agent level, or software that you're either utilizing even just for communication or for forms of validation? Or is there anything on that front end that is specific to the real estate agent community that y'all are seeing or utilizing today?
I would say my local association now provides ForeWarn to all of our members. And if you're not familiar with ForeWarn, you can look up a phone number and it will pull up who that phone number is tied to, if they have a criminal record, things like that. So good for safety, just if you're about to go meet somebody you've never met before, to look up and see who they are. But when it pertains to seller fraud, I mean, this is the number you called me from, but I look up that number and it's registered this name and you told me this was your name. I mean, that's instantly, okay, hey, that's a red flag. I need to pay attention and maybe dig a little bit deeper. So that's the only one I can think of that we're using on the very front end as soon as that call comes in.
No, that's great. I hadn't heard of that previously, but that's awesome to hear. We'll definitely share that as part of the follow-up on this. It's called ForeWarn, you said?
Yeah, ForeWarn.
Nice. Is it free or do you have to pay for it? Or
it is a paid service, but like I said, my local association now started including it in our member dues as a benefit, which is great for agents. Yeah,
that's great. Jim, what about you? Any technology that you're utilizing or that Keller Williams is offering?
Obviously the transaction and the form software that we use, whether it's, DocuSign, .loop, or a variety of other, forms that we use that, nobody's writing contracts anymore. We're all using, these delivery systems, and they do have, signature authentication, below their signature. But, there are ways to get around that too. So to what extent does DocuSign and .loop and those service providers, I don't know what levels of security they have, built into those platforms.
Yeah, and
but I'm assuming there's.
Yeah. And obviously with the topic, like, we go to the notion of fraud and security and all that, and that's great. And I think the ForeWarn one's an amazing example. I think I asked one for that, like, can you start to have some sort of help from a technology perspective to find red flags, and then as it gets through, but also, like, as you mentioned, Jim, like transaction coordinators, that's just another person now involved in the transaction. And when we think about it from a fraud perspective, we always look at like what we call a surface area of risk. And so if there's a transaction happening between two parties and it's just, me and Jennifer exchanging and nobody else is involved, that surface of risk is just two people. And so our communications, as long as Jennifer's information doesn't get hacked or my information doesn't get compromised, and we're communicating effectively and have met each other, all of that surface area is very low. Now, all of a sudden, we add in a real estate agent, we add in a transaction coordinator, we add in multiple different pieces of technology and software that are being utilized for contracts and those sorts of things. And you can just see how that web or surface area grows and grows and grows, where whether it was an impersonated seller at the beginning or someone who has now acted or found their way into the transaction, just becomes harder and harder to detect. And so I think that's where my curiosity goes more than anything, of just thinking through, all right, by the time it gets to the title company, how many other hands have kind of been in the pot that could now require the title agent to slow things down even further, or have more confidence because it has gone through other checks. And that's something that we think about a lot at Certified, because we think that if we could get further upstream and support the real estate community, that then the transaction could be more secure all the way through. Matt, I know you've sort of thought through some of those things as well. You mentioned that, you know, communicating with the real estate agent early, but is there anything that you've seen, whether it was at, you know, Continental or other title companies, or even, you know, ways that you've seen the title company support the real estate agent with technology or other things early on in the transaction?
Yeah, it's not necessarily technology, it's education and communication. And you know, I think sometimes we walk the fine line of not scaring people to death, but figuring out how to communicate a very serious message. And you know, this, I talk about the good old days. I mean, this really didn't become such a major problem until, I mean, it started ramping up in what, 2014, 2015, and they were primarily, fraudsters were primarily targeting sellers, trying to steal their proceeds at the end of a transaction. And sadly, the fraudsters get more educated and more sophisticated every year, and now they're targeting the buyers, stealing their cash to close, and they're pouncing right when the contract goes to the title company, in hopes that they can steal the cash to close, you know, 2 or 3 or 4 weeks before closing happens, and you know, nobody knows about it for 2 or 3 weeks. But really, it's a communication without fear. And you know, I think the struggle, you know, we've had conversations a lot at Continental about how do we, because really what we want to do is figure out a way to communicate directly to the buyer. But we need the real estate agent, because I mean, we don't know who the buyer is till there's a contract, right? Jim touched on it. When, I mean, the real estate agent gets the contract, you know, that's the starting point. And then it can take 2 or 3 days for that contract to get to the title company, and the title company has it for 2 or 3 days. Well, all of a sudden a week's gone by and that contract's out there, and the fraudsters know it. And the title company can't jump in until we get it and get to work on it, right? So the fraudsters could have pounced already. So it just kind of goes back to this constant communication and figuring out from the title company standpoint, what can we do better to get this message out to the buyers? So if you think about the average buyer, you know, whether it's a buyer or seller, I think the national average is still what, every 7 or 8 years before they're buying and selling. And if this problem didn't really ramp up until 2015, and this is 2023, there's 8 years where really they started pouncing on specifically on buyers, Tyler, right? Here in the past, what, 5 years?
Yeah.
The average buyer and seller has no idea that there's a massive fraud problem in the real estate industry.
Yeah.
So unless we can somehow scare them, shock them, communicate with them, they're just going along their merry way thinking, hey, you know, me and Gina are buying a house in a month and this is awesome.
Yeah.
And they don't know the red flags to look out for.
I mean, you touched on so many great things in there, because I think that you're absolutely right. I mean, we started Certified 6+ years ago, and it was like crickets. We thought we were talking to nobody. You know, we'd show up at these conferences like, who are these crazy people telling me that, you know,
why is this necessary?
What are they talking about? And now it's like every, you know, other speaker is talking about what to do to try to prevent it. And it's just happened very, very quickly. But one of the things, I guess, two things you mentioned. One is, you know, that balance of how do you scare people to a certain degree, but not like scare them totally away, right? And I think that it is hard, because for those of us in the industry that we talk about it a lot, it feels like we just keep talking about it. But you're absolutely right. I mean, there is every single day buyers and sellers that come to a potential transaction that have no idea that this is a problem in this industry. And I guess I would ask that, like, maybe Jennifer, you know, as you think about how do you balance sort of the tell them, don't scare them too much, but also like with the validation of a potential seller, like how do you do that without them getting, you know, turned off or pushed away to say, what is this? Like, why am I getting asked all of these questions? This feels, you know, overbearing in some way. How do you think about balancing that?
Kind of like parenting. I mean, I think I told my daughters if they ever smoked a cigarette, they would just die instantly. That's what happened. So, sometimes a little bit of fear is a healthy thing. But, I really think this is a great opportunity for, especially speaking to realtors, this is where you can really show your value. Because like you just said, most consumers have no idea. They don't know about this. They don't know about a lot of things that go on in the transaction. And so when you sit down with them and you can say, and here are the things we're going to look out for, and here are the steps we're going to take, and you show them what's happening, and then here's how I'm going to help you navigate through this, and we're going to get you there. That's really showing your worth to them. I mean, this is what we are getting paid to do, is to take care of you and get you to the finish line without any issues or problems. And, if you just try to wing it on your own, you think, oh, I'm just going to go straight directly to that for sale by owner and make an offer and try to maybe cut out an agent or do things on your own. They don't realize how many things could potentially go wrong. So you educate them enough, but then you're also showing your value and your expertise and your knowledge. And because people are on webinars like this today and they're educated and they know what to look for, that they're going to take care of their clients and make sure these things don't happen.
I love that, because that consultative approach, I think, is so key. Like we try to tell people that too. They're worried to talk about it. And there's a lot of people who've been worried, obviously, to say, like, if they've ever had a problem or have had a fraud, because what might happen to their business or their reputation or whatever it is. But as we've leaned into that more and said, look, admit, that like this occurred or this could occur, and here's what we're going to do in order to keep you safe. Here's the steps that we're going to take, because it's so much worse if something does happen and nobody talked about it earlier. And we've seen that as well. Jim, do you have anything to add on that in terms of like how to speak to, that fine balance of, you might be at risk during this transaction, but I'm going to take care of you?
It's really, I think about when you get the sign call on an expensive listing and somebody that you don't know wants to see the house. And I need to protect my seller by saying, can you provide me a pre-approval? Can you provide me proof of funds? And oftentimes when you ask that, a buyer might get offended. And it's like, you would want me to ask that if you were my seller. Okay. And so it's that kind of protection it's no different than talking about fraud. And when a fraudster calls you, texts you, emails you, and, is trying to enter a transaction unlawfully, it's your job to protect, your client. And by talking about it and educating them, I think is the best way to keep fraud from happening.
Yeah. If we could paint a picture of like the ideal world, like, and for me, it's always been like, how do you get, is there a world where a consumer, comes to their first meeting with a real estate agent and says, I picked you because I know you're going to keep me safe and we're going to have this transaction go really smoothly. But like, is that ideal? Is that too unrealistic? Like, what would be the ideal kind of world where everyone stays safe and there's like a really good relationship between real estate agent, title, and like the deal can flow smoothly, knowing that there is still fraud? The easy answer would say, well, just get rid of all the fraudsters. But let's assume that you can't do that part. What's ideal state from first interaction all the way through to close?
I would say, I don't think that's what you're talking about. I don't think that's like pie in the sky. I think that's realistic. One of the big things that if I speak to agents, or I'm always pushing the agents on my team, is they're going to be on social media and they're going to be sharing things. Don't just share like, hey, look, just sold, look how many houses I've sold. Share things that are helpful. Share, make a little video about a certain topic. Or I have some young people on my team, TikToks. I don't make TikToks, but they do, or a TikTok or an Instagram reel that's 30 seconds of you explaining, hey, here's how this works. Here's what happens during a home inspection, and they give things that are educational. So I think if agents focus more on, when they're marketing and when they're talking to consumers, working in those little bite-sized pieces of information, just again, showing what they know that the consumers don't know, that's a great way to actually attract business for yourself. So, it's not only are you taking good care of your clients, it's a good business model.
Yeah, that's great. Other additions?
Good here.
Matt, what would be ideal for
Great
you?
answer.
Get rid of all the fraudsters, Tyler. Come on. That's what we want to do, right? I mean, the ideal is that we're all working together and that we're in constant communication, and it's a partnership, and we solve problems before they become a problem. I mean, I know this is a certified webinar, and this is on your platform with your logo all over it, Tyler, but we've been a Continental Title, we've been a customer of Certified for several years, and it's an amazing tool, the technology and the safety that's built into it. And I know Jim's done business with us, and his customers have gone through the process, but nothing is foolproof. They're sadly, I mean, fraud still happens even though we're using Certified in the transaction. So we got to take it all the way back to communication from the front end and expectations. I guess the perfect world is that from the minute that contract gets signed, everybody involved in the transaction knows exactly what's going to happen for the next 30 or 40 days or however long it takes to get that thing to the closing table. So that so that the, hey, what is this? Or the, hey, what if? Or, all those questions get shoved out the window. That's really the perfect world, Tyler, I think you're looking for.
No, I mean, you're absolutely right. Like, I'll be the first to admit that just utilizing Certified is not going to completely eliminate fraud in any organization. It won't happen, because that surface area, like I said, is too big. There's too many people coming in at different points in time, and Certified can be utilized for a good chunk of it, and we can catch a lot of stuff. But if there's things happening outside of our platform or other communications taking place, and then ultimately, there can be instances where fraud could still occur, or where, a company's utilizing our software on all transactions, and then for some reason, we're going to do it a little bit different on this one, and we're not going to utilize it, right? And so when I think about ideal state, I always think about, like, how do we make it as repetitive of a process as possible? And you all talked about it a little bit, of like those relationships between the real estate agent and the title company. I mean, almost like a playbook. Like, how do we get to a point where we know, hey, this is what it's going to be like to work with us. This is what you can expect. And if there's any deviation from that, then that's where the red flags go up. And we should all slow down and kind of have that culture of being willing to talk about it. We've gotten a couple of questions that have come in from the audience. So I'm just going to ask the first one here. Does the title company ask for identification, or are they depending on notaries? And this is coming, she says, I am a notary and I ask for proper IDs.
We do. And as much as we would prefer that there's never a mobile notary in a real estate transaction, right? But we all know that's not realistic for a lot of different reasons. So yes, we do. We do ask for IDs at the closing table. And then the mobile notaries, the same thing. If real estate documents are getting signed, the people are required to show ID when the notary's there. But they're, title company can't be expected to be an expert that I know with 100% certainty what a proper driver's license looks like in all 50 states in the country, right? That's beyond our scope. We do everything possible that we can to prove that the ID is valid. And then, this is a whole different topic that we could go into for the next 2 hours about mobile notaries and the tripping points and the things that can happen there. But I mean, the simple answer to the question is yes, we ask for IDs, but the but is all the things that can happen after that.
Well, and I'll chime in on that, just because the instances we have had here, one of the red flags we tell you to look out for with these fake sellers is they want to use their own notary.
Yes.
And so absolutely. That should be a red flag. Right,
that should
there.
be the biggest red
company
flag
should be
ever.
Sending a notary to them. Yeah. So that's just one of the things that has come up.
Yeah.
Well, and I know that we've seen fraud cases where they say, well, it got notarized, and this, the notary, saw this ID and approved it, and we, move forward. And so the title company was more trusting because of, that scenario. Yeah, fascinating on that part for sure. Jennifer, I don't know if you saw it. There was an article, I think at the beginning of the week, that NAR put out, and I think you sort of labeled seller impersonation fraud as title pirates, if I remember correctly. I thought that was I thought that was very clever. We really liked that internally. But a question just came in, and I don't know if you'll know this, but it kind of relates. Matt, you might have more experience with this actually, but does home title lock protect owners?
Oh, really? Make somebody else answer that question. I hate home title lock because they don't do anything. It's just I mean, I don't want to get sued, but this is solely my opinion, right? And
we'll put the disclaimer up on the recording right now.
Yes,
okay?
please put a disclaimer up.
Yeah,
that I don't think home title lock is a worthwhile product at all because they don't do anything. And I'm just going to leave it at that.
Fair enough. Any other opinions?
I don't know what it is. I haven't used it.
Yeah, I mean, there's
Must
a
be
lot.
A title product.
Yeah.
It's a lot of and
they advertise.
They advertise.
Oh yeah, they get Newt Gingrich and yeah.
Oh, okay.
They basically say that if you pay them $30 a month, that there's no way anybody could ever steal your house, and it's wasted money.
Okay.
Yeah, and I mean the reason why I brought it up and why I tried to link it back to the NAR article a little bit is just because I think that nomenclature matters, and I think that there is a lot of people calling different things, or it's the same thing, different things, and I think that can be good, but then I can think that sometimes also there's less. It goes back to the process and things being more standardized, and so when it's called, we even for a while, we're like, is it vacant land scams? Is it seller impersonation? What's the right way to speak to it so that we all have a shared vocabulary and understanding of what it is we're trying to tackle? Because where we see this, and again, it sounds like we're all aligned on this, is it comes back to truly proper identity verification. And that's what we set out to with Certified Early Days, was to be able to provide proper identification of individuals. And what I'm hearing right now is a little bit of yeah, we all want that, but who's responsible for that part of it? And then how do we make sure that person, that we saw an ID for at the beginning of the transaction is still that person all the way through to the end of the transaction? And that part's hard. I mean, it's hard for everybody. So let's see. I see another question in here. Maybe not. All right. Looks like we got those. Audience can continue to put in some additional questions. I want to jump back into, recommendations specifically for real estate agents. I know we've talked about it a little bit, Jennifer, but it looks like we have quite a few more real estate agent sort of community members on this call than title agents we typically have. So
That's great.
Yeah, it's great to see sort of that audience broadening a little bit. But we just love, as you go out into the market today, especially with the conditions that we talked about, what is sort of your top 3 things that you would want everybody on the call that's an agent to be thinking about?
Well, I guess first of all, just continue to stay on top of these things. I mean, these scams and these frauds are always evolving. They're coming up with something new. They're really clever. I mean, they're smart. My client sent me an email once. The only reason we knew it was fake is because we had terminated a transaction. And then when it came to the week of when we would have closed, he got an email from that previous title company with the wiring instructions. Looked very real. But the fact that, we had terminated, we knew the title company wouldn't have been sending us wiring instructions for closing. That's the only reason we really caught it. So you have to stay on your toes. I hate to say this, but I had a closing on Friday and I represented the sellers. The buyer's funds are still not here. We are trying to figure out where they are. So we very well might be in the middle of a wire fraud scam right now. So it's still there. You just can't ever really let your guard down. So just stay educated. Webinars like this, pay attention to the things that are put out by your local and state and national associations. We're always trying to get out messaging when we see things like this going on across the industry. And then just be a resource for your consumers. This is valuable information for you to convey to them, just so they know about it. And then you can also show your value if they work with you.
Shameless plug, but Jennifer, if you don't know, we do have a fraud recovery services team. So
I might be messaging you after.
I was just counting 5 days.
I'm we're running out of time. When we get off this call, Jennifer, we're going to need to talk to those buyers and try to help them out. Uh, what about you, Matt? Like, what are you kind of thinking, or if you were, presenting at Alta today, what would be your message for the audience in terms of what to look out for the remainder of this year? And
well, it's really, I mean, a down market, and the fraudsters. I think that's why they came up with this vacant lot fraud and rental property scams, is because when the real estate market's booming and houses are selling right and left all day long, it's easy to it was easy for them to jump in and steal cash to close. And now in a down market, they are, Jennifer, you're right. They're always evolving. They're always on to the next thing. And when I became a fraud examiner, they kind of pounded into our heads. We're always 2 steps behind the fraudsters, because as soon as we figure out what they're doing, they're off and they're doing something else, and we're running to catch up with them.
Now we have AI. I'm sure they're
Yeah.
going to
Oh
use
my
that.
gosh, AI scares
I
me to
mean,
death. Yes.
who knows what
Yeah.
they're going to come up with?
Who knows what's coming next, right? Yeah. So it's ever diligent and paying attention and reading trade publications, webinars like this, in the real estate community, Jennifer, Jim, whatever NAR is communicating, or even your local, Jim here in Kansas City. I know you're heavily involved in CAR and MAR, and Jennifer probably down in Texas, you are too. But then also, what I've told people when I teach to title companies is make sure you're involved in your state title company, so that they know what they should be communicating to their member title companies. So I'd push that back on, CAR, MAR, is it called TAR? I don't know what the Texas Association.
Yes,
Just make sure there's somebody there that, that's tuned into this and is pumping information out to real estate agents, as much as possible. You said it earlier, over communicate. There's no such thing as too much communication, and there really isn't. We've got to constantly be talking about this and getting information into the hands of the people that it needs to be to.
And Jim, what about you? What are you sort of focusing on, or anything else that you can add there?
I mean, without repeating, from a high level, it's all about awareness, education, and communication. And as Matt mentioned, yesterday I was at a Missouri Realtor function with all of the local AEs and incoming presidents. And that would have been a great place, a great venue to share information about fraud. It wasn't on the agenda. They had other things to talk about, but we should never miss an opportunity when we have an audience, we don't have a full agenda, to share this as an important topic in our industry.
Yeah, and I mean, that's a great call out, just in terms of that, like, there's always more to do. The fact that there are those sorts of events that are taking place and it's not even a topic, just says that we've got to continue to work together to educate and try to protect, at the end of the day, the consumers, because they're the ones that are, we talk about a down market and there being less deals to be done. But if you're one of the unfortunate people who is actually doing a deal and then you lose all of your life savings, they're the real victims in all of this. The rest of us will be able to continue to move forward onto the next transaction, and continue to build a business. But that could be a just financial ruin for somebody individually. So I appreciate that, Jim, and that honesty there, of that it wasn't even communicated, because I think that just proves that we've all got more work to do. Anything we missed? Any final items? I don't see any other questions. So any closing thoughts from any of our panelists?
I think I saw one just in there just now saying that their county offers a service where if anything changes on your title, they email the homeowner. So I haven't seen that down here, but yeah, things like that. I think it's just going to take layers and layers of security to help prevent against these things in the future.
Yeah, we should have mentioned that earlier, Jennifer. Thanks for pointing that out. A lot of counties, you can sign up for free, and they will notify you if a deed gets filed or something on your property. And I shouldn't continue to speak ill of Title Lock, but you don't need to pay somebody to to watch your property, the county will do it for you for free. And not every county, but most of the big ones will do it.
Yeah, it looks like some other people are posting some more comments about those sorts of things in terms of like propertyfraudalert.com. I've never heard of that. I don't know what that is, but it sounds like there are more tools that are becoming available, and you just have to be aware of it and get out there and use it. All right. Well, I want to thank all of our panelists. Really appreciate all of your time today. Thought that this was a great conversation. Really fun to hear different perspectives around a super meaningful topic for us and for all of you. And so thank you very much for your time. Appreciate it. And look forward to hosting you again sometime soon.